Well, if you build a house, you need to have a good foundation. That's the starting point. If the foundation is bad, then the house will have problems. I have seen houses that are literally being pulled apart because of a bad foundation. Big cracks in the walls, sagging ceilings, because the foundation is broken and falling. I've also seen houses whose bad foundations were worked on and repaired. And the house now is stable and looks good. You would never know that it had problems. Like that, as we've been reading about Jacob and his family, they seem like a terrible foundation to build upon. We've seen a lot of bad things, but they are the beginning of Israel, the beginning of God's people. God's people who are to make God known to the world, and through whom the Savior will come. They need some work done. The family is broken. The foundation is unstable. For one thing, God's people are or should be characterized by love. But not this family. There's a whole lot of hate going on in this family. They're not ready, but God is working on them. And He will use some hard situations and even some terrible things that the family does, He will use them to change them. God will transform this broken family into the beginning of God's people. And that is what we see in the rest of the book of Genesis. But it's very easy for us to see where other people are broken. What about ourselves? Are you and I known for love? Are we being wise? And do we really listen to God? Or are we more like Jacob's family? Hopefully not that bad. But we are all a work in progress. So we begin in chapter 37, verse 1. It says, Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojournings, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. And so this is the beginning of the last section of Genesis. Verse 1 actually transitions from the previous chapter to this one. So back in chapter 36, it was a genealogy of Esau and his descendants. And so this statement at the beginning of verse 1, it puts the focus back on Jacob, and it sets Jacob and Esau apart from each other. They're not the same. They are on different tracks in life. And this is highlighted in the fact that Jacob is living in the land of Canaan. He's in the promised land. But Esau and his descendants, they are no longer in the land. Esau used to be in the land, but he in a sense have settled outside of the land. And then we get that introductory phrase, these are the generations of Jacob. And so now we are moving on to the account of Jacob. But the focus in this section is mostly on Joseph. And the focus is clear from the start, because it says, these are the generations of Jacob, and what's the very next word? Joseph. And so, but this section is not only about Joseph, it's about the covenant family. And so it will focus also on his brothers. And before this, God was working through individuals like Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Now He's working through the whole family. So 12 brothers, 12 tribes of Israel. But we're told about Joseph. He's 17 years old, and he's a shepherd, and he's helping some of his brothers. And right away we hear that he brings a bad report about his brothers. Now, how are we to understand this bad report? What does that mean? We're not given any details about the report other than this. It was a bad report. But because this word bad could also have the idea of evil, some people suggest that this was a lie, that he was slandering his brothers. And some people, they suggest that this was an exaggerated report. So he came and he exaggerated what they were doing just to make them look worse than they were. And then there are some people who suggest it was a true report, but it was about a bad or an evil thing that his brothers were doing. And I think this one makes the most sense. Based on Joseph's character, as we read the story of Joseph, we will see he's not perfect, but he does what's right. Joseph has strong character. But then we ask, but is Joseph being a tattletale here? I mean, he's saying what's true, but is he just tattling, trying to get his brothers in trouble? And then many people read it that way, that he's just tattling. Because that's clearly the perspective of his brothers. They don't like that he tells on them. But it's ironic that we tend to side with the brothers here, and people tend to say, oh, Joseph's just being a little brat. He's being a tattletale. The brothers are not good company to be in. But we think like the brothers, I think, often. But here we go. We don't really know if he was tattling. We don't really know what he was thinking. But again, tattling doesn't seem to fit the character that we see in Joseph. But it's possible that Joseph is immature. He is young. It's very possible that he is immature and he's not going about things the best way. It's possible that he's not thinking about his brother's feelings and how this might affect his brothers. But what we know for sure is that Joseph is actually being faithful to his father. He's doing the right thing, but he may be doing it in a wrong way, a bad way. If nothing else, he may be a little unwise, and a little wisdom goes a long way. Well, let's keep reading. Verse 3. Now, Israel, or Jacob, loved Joseph more than any other of his sons, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. So Jacob is still playing favorites. And we have to ask, didn't he learn anything from his own childhood and from the rest of his life? But from his own childhood, he saw firsthand the problems that favoritism causes. I mean, he actually lived it. He was his mom's favorite, Esau was his dad's favorite, and it caused problems. But Jacob gives Joseph a special robe. This is traditionally called a robe or coat of many colors. And we get that from the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew. That's where we get that idea of many colors. If you read the NIV, it will say an ornate robe. And this oftentimes it could suggest an ornamented robe. But literally, the word is a palm of the hand robe, which suggests a robe with very long sleeves. And there's only one other place that this is found, this palm of the hand robe is found in the Old Testament. And it describes the robe that was worn by David's daughter, Tamar. It was a kind of robe that would be worn by princesses. This likely describes a royal robe. Jacob gave his son Joseph a royal robe. And it seems to suggest that Jacob is treating Joseph like he is the leader of the family over his siblings. But why does he give Joseph this robe? I mean, we're told it's because he was the son of his old age. And so it's not just because he's Rachel, his favorite wife's son, but because Joseph was born when Jacob was a little bit older. And when his life began to change for the better, when he started to gain wealth and his wives were not fighting over him so much. But he may also be favoring Joseph here because he is younger, just like Jacob himself was the younger son. And he may have given this robe to Joseph because he was faithful to him. I mean, he brought the report for his brothers. He's the good kid. But his brothers are jealous of him and they hate him for it. And it says they could not speak peacefully to him. In other words, they had nothing nice to say to him. This phrase suggests that they wouldn't even greet him. So when they got around in the morning, there was Joseph. They didn't say hi. They just ignored him, walked away from him, walked past him. They wanted nothing to do with him. And you may notice as we read through here that the word brother is repeated over and over many times in this story. It's highlighting the fact that they are all brothers, but the brothers don't act like brothers. There's no brotherly love. In fact, they hate him. Does this remind you of a couple other brothers that we've talked about in the last few months? Cain and Abel? It's not good. In fact, this is a complete mess. And somehow, Jacob doesn't see it. Jacob should have known how his brothers already felt about his son, about Joseph. And should have known what this gift would do to the family. But he gave it anyways. And he made things worse. A little wisdom would go a long way. Now, we said that about Joseph, and now we're saying this about Jacob. A little wisdom would go a long way. They're making unwise choices. We might be able to think of how they could do it better. How could they handle things differently? But we could also find ourselves in situations that are similar to this. Maybe at home or at work or even in church. So this reminds us to think before you act. Think before you do things. What might you do differently? Are you being godly? Are you being wise? Are you being hurtful or helpful? Ephesians 5, verses 15 through 21 says, "Look carefully how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is." Know what God wants you to do, how he wants you to live. He says, it continues on, "Do not get drunk with wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit, addressing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody to the Lord with your heart, giving thanks always and for everything to God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ." He said, these are ways to walk wise. These are ways to be wise. And so we are to be wise in our interactions with other believers. And we're also told that we need to walk in wisdom towards outsiders. Colossians 4, verse 3 to 6. says, at the same time, pray also for us. Paul is talking about his ministry that he's doing and asking the Colossians to pray for him, that God may open to us a door for the word to declare the mystery of Christ, on account of which I am in prison, that I may make it clear which is how I ought to speak. In verse 5, he says, walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of the time. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. Now, this specifically has to do with our testimony for Jesus and our sharing the gospel, the good news of Jesus, to others. And he's saying, be careful how you interact with non-believers, with those people outside the church, so that you can represent Jesus and the truth, the gospel, well. A little wisdom would go a long way. So be wise in how you interact with people. Well, that's only the beginning, and it keeps going. So let's keep reading verse 5, 37 verse 5. Now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf. His brothers said to him, are you indeed to reign over us? Are you indeed to rule over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. So Joseph has his dream, and he tells his brothers about it. And in the dream, they're out working in the field, he and his brothers, and they're bundling together their wheat or their barley or whatever it is they're harvesting. And then Joseph's bundle just stands up. And his brothers' bundles then gather around him and bow down to Joseph's bundle. And you'll notice there's no explanation or interpretation given of this dream. But everyone knows exactly what it means. Also, you may notice that God is not mentioned here, but this dream is clearly a message from God, and they know it. Think back. How did God speak to Jacob? Through dreams. All right, so Jacob would have a dream, and God would tell him what he needed to do, what he needed to know. But here, God doesn't speak, but he uses symbolism to express his message. And so this is actually God calling and commissioning Joseph. God will do what the dream expresses. God will use Joseph in this way. Two J names, I'm getting them mixed up here. Joseph in this way. But they all know that God speaks through dreams. And they know his dreams, Joseph's dreams, has significance, that it has meaning. And so, first of all, Joseph knows it, and he seems to be excited about it. And he tells his brothers, is he bragging? I don't know, but again, I don't think so, because this doesn't seem like Joseph's character. But knowing how his brothers feel, he might not be wise in telling them all about it. On the other hand, he may be thinking that the dream will convince his brothers that he should lead. I mean, God said it. Joseph does seem to be young and a little naive. And then the brothers, they know that the dream has significance and meaning, but they immediately reject it. They're angry, and we're told again that they hate Joseph. Why? Well, they already don't like that Joseph is the favorite. They don't like him because he's being the favorite. And they probably think he's unqualified to lead. After all, he is the kid, and they are all older. He's the youngest. They're older than him. They probably think they are more qualified, and they should come before him, right? So they are jealous of him. But this is God's plan. And it will happen. Joseph will lead. But they don't like the idea. The brothers don't like this idea. So even though this is coming from God, they're angry at Joseph. Verse 9. Then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, Behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars were bowing down to me. But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you? And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. So he has the second dream, and this time the sun and the moon and the stars bow down to Joseph. And this dream has the same meaning as the first. And so this is a confirmation of the first dream. God is really going to do this. He's really saying that Joseph's brothers will bow down to him. But this dream also escalates the message, because it's not only his brothers who will bow down, but his parents will bow to him. This suggests that Joseph will lead the entire family. Again, everyone knows exactly what the dream means, and they respond to it. Jacob is put off by it, and by the suggestion that the parents would bow down to the kid. And so he rebukes Joseph. Like he's going too far now. First one was okay, but now, you're going too far now. And maybe he sees it as a little disrespectful. But Jacob, we're told, kept the saying in mind. Or as he's thinking about it, he's considering it. It doesn't make sense to him. He doesn't really like that, but he believes it's from God. And so he takes it seriously and keeps it in mind. But the brothers are jealous. They understand the dreams imply that God has chosen Joseph to rule. But why would God choose him? I mean, he gets everything. He's already dad's favorite. He gets everything. And they want it for themselves. So Jacob heard God and wasn't convinced. And he took let's wait and see type approach or position. The brothers heard God and refused to listen. They immediately reject it. They wanted no part of it. And so they all knew it was from God, but they opposed his message, which means that they were opposing God. And that's never a good idea. And no good will ever come from it. When you hear from God, when you read his word, do you listen? God talks about people who refuse to listen. And you know what he calls them? He calls them rebellious. We see this in Isaiah chapter 30, verse 9 to 11. He says, For they are a rebellious people, lying children unwilling to hear the instruction of the Lord, who say to the seers, in other words, those who are seeing dreams, visions, they say to those seers, those people who have dreams, do not see. Stop your dreaming. Stop your visions. And to the prophets, do not prophesy to us what is right. Speak to us smooth things, prophecy and illusion. In other words, don't tell us do this, that this is what God wants. Just tell us what we want to hear. Tell us what makes us feel good. He continues, he says, leave the way, turn aside from the path. Let us hear no more about the Holy One of Israel. So we don't care what God wants. We don't want to hear about being holy like he is holy. Just tell us what we want to hear. You see, they don't care about obeying the Holy One. And so they just don't listen. And they rebel against God. Well, then in the New Testament, 2 Timothy 4, verses 3 to 4 says, For the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, But having itching ears, they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own positions. They're really doing the same thing as those people in Isaiah. And they will turn away from listening to the truth and wander off into myths. So they reject the truth and wander off onto the lies because it's what they want to hear. They have God's truth, but they reject it because they don't like what it says. And they'll find someone who will tell them what they want to hear. Someone who teaches something that makes them feel good, and they say, well, let's just follow this guy. He says what we like. Don't be like those rebellious people. When you hear God, listen, obey, follow. When you hear God, listen. So Jacob's family is not in very good shape. But it gets worse. Let's keep reading, verse 12. Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. And he said to them, here I am. So he said to them, go, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word. Which is interesting because he's saying, bring me a report. How did this all start? He brought a report. I think this is Joseph's job. This is what he's being told to do. So anyways, so he says, go and bring me word. So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a man found him wandering in the fields, and the man asked him, what are you seeking? I am seeking my brothers, he said. Tell me, please, where they are pasturing the flock. And the man said, they have gone away, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. And so the brothers are about 50 miles away from home pasturing their flock. They're like Bedouins. They travel around and pasture where there's good pasture land. And so, but Jacob sends Joseph to check on them and to report back to him. Now at this point, Jacob seems a little witless. Why would he send his son out there? I mean, how does he not know how his other sons feel about Joseph? How does he not know that this isn't safe to send him that far away from home and away from dad's protection out there amongst his brothers? Where they could do anything to him and dad wouldn't know it. But this is what he does. Jacob doesn't recognize the threat to Joseph, and he sends him out there. Now, Joseph goes out there. He can't find them. He's wandering around in the field. A man sees him, and he had heard that the brothers were moving on. And so Joseph goes and another 13 to 14 miles away and finds them. Verse 18. They saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and he will see that we will see what will become of his dreams. But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, let us not take his life. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood, throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hands to restore him to his father. So they hate Joseph so much that as soon as they see him, they want to kill him. They resent his dreams so much that they just want to be rid of him. And they're in a place where they can get away with it. And nobody will know. And so they decide to throw him in a pit. It was basically an empty cistern, a big hole that was used to collect water. But it's a dry one at this point, so it's empty. And they could, in a cistern like that, was a large hole, you could easily hide a dead body and nobody would find it. Or you could leave a person in it just to die of starvation and exposure over time. And nobody was around to know it. But Reuben comes and he hears that they're planning to kill him and throw him in the pit. And he convinces them to do the second thing. Just leave him in the hole. But his plan is to come back and to rescue him. You see, Reuben is the oldest, and so he's trying to lead here. And so he says, just leave him. He's planning to come back and rescue him, and this is half good. I mean, he wants to save Joseph, but he tries to lead using deception. He should have just said to them, don't kill him, that's wrong. Direct, true. Don't kill him because it's wrong. Well, let's keep reading, verse 23. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty, there was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat. And look, now this is interesting. I'm going to interrupt myself here. They threw him in a pit to what? Die. And then they sat down to eat, to sustain their own lives. Catch the irony there? They threw him in a pit to die all alone. They sat down to eat together, an act very well known in that culture as an act of fellowship. They've totally abandoned him. What they're doing doesn't fit. It doesn't make sense. Where was I? Verse 25, they sat down to eat. Then they sat down to eat. And looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him. And then Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. They took Joseph to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes and returned to his brothers and said, the boy is gone, and where shall I go? So, following Reuben's suggestion, they take Joseph's robe off of him, tearing off that symbol of his being the favorite, that symbol of his possibly being in a higher position over them. They tear it off of them, and they throw him in the pit until some traders come by. And then Judah has this idea that they should sell him rather than kill him, because then at least they'll get some profit from it. I thought we can make some money here. But even worse is his total irrational and immoral reasoning, his twisted thinking here. We shouldn't kill him. Why? Because he's our brother. Instead, we should just sell him into slavery because he's our brother. That doesn't add up. They are both totally and completely wrong. But he justifies the one over the other. Judah would fit right in with today's relative thinkers, with those who say, well, right and wrong just depends on the situation. And we would say, no, right and wrong depends on God. Right and wrong depends on biblical ethics and morality that we have from God. But these traders come by, and if you notice the traders, at one point they're called Ishmaelites, and another point they're called Midianites. It refers to the same group here. They were, both the Ishmaelites and Midianites were descendants of Abraham, one through Hagar and one through one group through Keturah. And it seems that it appears that these two groups intermarried. And so we can refer to both of them kind of interchangeably with the names. But these traders, they buy Joseph and they take him to Egypt. Well, then Reuben comes back. He's been off doing some work or something. And he comes back and he finds that Joseph's gone and he's at a total loss. What do I do now? Again, he's the oldest son. As the oldest son, Reuben is responsible to lead the family when Jacob, the father, is not around. But he failed. He doesn't know how he can face his father now. But there's irony in his question, because he says, where shall I go? Well, I could suggest he could easily run after those traders, that caravan, and catch them and buy his brother back and save him. He could still save him, get Joseph back. Well, let's keep reading verse 31. Then they took Joseph's robe and slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in blood. And they sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, we have found. Please identify whether it is your son's robe or not. And he identified it and said, it is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his garments and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him. But he refused to be comforted and said, no, I shall go down to Sheol to my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. So now the brothers, now they have to cover up their crime. And so they kill a goat, put his blood on Joseph's robe, and send it to their father. They're hard-hearted, and they ask, is this your son's robe? Notice they didn't say, is this our brother's robe? No. They want nothing to do with him. Still, is this your son's robe? Jacob sees it and comes to his own conclusion about what happened. So they don't even have to tell him a lie at this point. They just hide the truth. And we're told that Jacob mourns and says that he will mourn till the day he dies. And no one is able to comfort him. Of course, his sons wouldn't be able to comfort him very well through their deceit and insincerity. Joseph's gone. But the home isn't a happier place without him there. The brothers, they hadn't really thought through what they were doing. They were blinded by their anger and their hate and their jealousy. This is an ugly, hateful story of jealousy and selfishness and brothers not acting brotherly. Not acting like brothers. I mean, we hear this, we read this, and we think, these are the people of God? These are the people that God will use to reach the world? Something's not right here. And it's true. God will have to break them down and build up their character. In fact, he's already at work. You'll notice God isn't mentioned at all in this chapter. But it's clear that he's working in their lives. In fact, later, Joseph will say, God did it. I mean, the brothers did evil, but God worked through it all. And did you notice these things? First, there was that man who just happened to find Joseph wandering around in the field. And that man just happened to overhear his brothers say that they were leaving town and where they were going, and was able to direct Joseph to the right place. And then, after the brothers had decided to kill Joseph, they didn't kill him. I mean, he was kept alive through two of the brothers' bad, selfish decisions or reasons, but he was kept alive. And while Jacob is mourning unconsolably, and the family thinks Joseph is dead or gone forever, the last thing we're told is that Joseph is sold in Egypt. But when he's sold as a slave in Egypt, he's not a low-level slave, like just someone who works out in the fields or with the animals or whatever. What is he? He's a house slave. And not only that, but in an important house. He is sold to Potiphar, an important official in Egypt. He's close, not too far away from from Pharaoh. He's working for someone who knows Pharaoh directly. You see, he's on track for those dreams to be fulfilled. Joseph is on his way up. God is putting him in the right place. And in the midst of all this darkness, of these terrible acts, of these sinful choices, God is still working. In spite of all they are doing, God's plan is moving forward. Even though this family is dysfunctional and broken, God is reshaping them. You see, they are a work in progress. And our God of grace, will change them into a family that loves one another and cares for one another. And then he will use this imperfect family to change the world. God is always working. You may not always see it, but if you are his child, you can be certain that he is working in your life. Through the good things and through the bad things. He is working to form you and to shape you and to build you up. And God can use you. He can use even the bad or the worst of circumstances for your good. He can use terrible situations to grow you and to make you more and more like Jesus. But knowing this is both a challenge and an encouragement. It challenges us to live in a way that is consistent with who we are as children of God. We are to love one another. We make wise choices. We listen to God. But it's also an encouragement because it encourages because we know that God uses imperfect people. No matter where you or I are at, he's still working. And so as we draw near to him and as we listen to him, he is changing us. And so then we can live a consistent Christian life. And he will use us more and more. I am a work in progress. And I will be till the day I stand before God, when I hope to hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant." I am a work in progress. You are a work in progress. My family is a work in progress. Your family is a work in progress. Our church is a work in progress. We are a work in progress. Now, over the years since I've known Art, I didn't tell him I was going to say this, but since I've known Art, I've had many conversations with Art that have ended with him saying, "We're making progress." So there's something that needs to be done, or there's something that needs to be fixed, but we're working on it and we're making progress. And I've always appreciated that. And I think it's appropriate here. We are all sinners who need God's grace. And because of his grace, we're making progress. Philippians 2 verses 12-13 says, "Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, so now, not only as in my presence, but much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure." He's working in us. You and I may be a work in progress. I mean, we've still got room to grow. We're not there yet. But because he is working in us, we're making progress.